Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by foundersuite.com. Today with me I have Mitch Grasso, CEO of Beautiful, coming to us from the Mission District in San Francisco. How's your day going, Mitch?
It's going great, thanks.
Cool. Any fun weekend plans? Watching the Warriors? What do you got going on?
Unfortunately, that's tonight. That should be over, I hope. But yeah, kids just got out of school, so we're figuring that out. And yeah,
cool. To be honest, I kind of hope it's 3-0. I would love to see like a drama and come back, and it's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's more fun. Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about Beautiful, which is a great name. Beautiful.ai. What is Beautiful, and where'd you come up with this idea?
Well, Beautiful.ai is a software, sort of a product to democratize design in the workplace. We use a little bit of AI to help people build, visually stunning documents. Our first product is a presentation tool. The idea being it brings great design to people who are not designers. And, by doing that frees them to focus on their story and their ideas and the stuff that they're good at, and not have to worry about the nitty gritty of designing their slides or figuring out how to visualize an idea or move boxes around or pick fonts or things like that.
Cool. And so go on, please.
Yeah, so I've been doing sort of content creation startups for a while, and my last startup was a company called SlideRocket, and SlideRocket was one of the first presentation tools to be in the cloud and take advantage of all the things that you get from that: collaboration, analytics, security, access. But at its heart, it was still this authoring tool. You just like PowerPoint or Keynote, you drag boxes around, you picked fonts, you made all the design decisions yourself, and you could create beautiful presentations with it. But we found that most users were not designers, and they still struggled with creating great slides. I sold that company to VMware in 2011 and went to VMware for a few years. And when I got out in 2014, I started thinking about what to do next. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do another startup. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And but I started building this idea of, like, what if I flipped it on its head? And what if I made a tool that took my design experience and my design knowledge and put it into the software and made the software the expert? What would that look like? Could we come up with something that was easy to use but still flexible enough? And ended up building this, what we call opinionated software, where it knows and understands the rules of great presentation design, the best practices, and it constrains the user and applies them. And again, lets the user focus on the story while the software makes it beautiful.
Interesting. Yeah. And so what's the most common use case then? Is this sales presentations, pitch decks for investors, or what?
We're seeing it across the board. I mean, we launched the product about 4 months ago in February, and the traction's been amazing. The feedback's been amazing. People seem to be really excited about the idea and really buying into it. So we're seeing pitch decks, we're seeing sales decks, we're seeing internal decks, external decks, we're seeing students use it, across the board.
And so when I create a deck, is it all hosted online, or is it also something I can download, attached to an email, or is it all kept in the cloud?
We're trying to keep people within the ecosystem. We do have export to PowerPoint and PDF. It's sort of not as great of an experience. You lose some of the animation and obviously the ability to just tweak stuff quickly. It's sort of an experience you kind of have to see for yourself. As you add your data and type stuff in or add images, the slide will relay out to make sure everything looks good, and it becomes this really freeing experience of just adding your content and not having to worry about how to position anything.
Yeah. No, it's cool. Excuse me. What's the AI part? Like, what is AI doing in this? I can understand
Yeah,
everything else.
that's a
Yeah.
good question. The spinning answer is that AI is sort of in the eye of the beholder. That AI is about creating software that's smarter than you. We're still in the early stages of what we call design AI, and the first step in that is building this rules-based system that understands all this stuff and then can, sort of an expert system that can kind of use those rules to heuristically do your layout and make it look good. As we move forward, we'll start adding more traditional AI features around machine learning and image analysis to help you tell your story as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. Yeah, we just recently switched like 3 weeks ago from our blog from HubSpot to Medium, and I actually like just the kind of like you mentioned a few minutes ago, the constraints. I mean, it looks good to start with, and the constraints are kind of nice. I actually kind of appreciate the constraints, right? Used to be on WordPress with had a million choices, and now we're down to a few, but I enjoy that. Yeah.
Right, and that's the argument I always make. You can build a timeline in PowerPoint. There's a billion different variations, a billion different ways you can create it, but do you really want to deal with that, or do you just want a timeline? And I was worried about the constraints. I was worried that people would push back against that stuff, but we get messages all the time of people like really appreciating that it's making them focus their information and keep their content tight.
Interesting. And is it a SaaS model or a subscription business, or what's the?
It's free right now. The intent is to make it to build a premium tier and start charging at some point. But right now, we're really just focused on making sure that the product works great and that users are engaged and happy. And the fundraising stuff we talk about like really enabled us to focus more on that than worry about bringing in dollars right now.
Yeah. One more question, and we'll get to the fundraising. I guess I haven't played with your product. I definitely want to check it out, and I will use it. But is it similar in the same category as like Prezi? I mean, Prezi's kind of a little bit of the,
Prezi's a tool that has sort of a gimmick of the zooming and the pulling out, but at its heart, it still requires you to do all this authoring. It still requires you to pick where everything's going to go and do all that design. This is about letting go of all this. This is for the people who don't want to be making those decisions. It's more in line with like a Squarespace or an authoring tool that does the intelligence for you, Canva, perhaps, things like that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you guys just closed a round, but tell me how much you guys have raised so far, and over how many rounds?
We've raised 16 and a quarter over 2 rounds.
And when did you start this business? You mentioned you just launched in February, so how much?
Well, I started working on the technology in January, or the beginning of February, beginning of 2014. I didn't raise a round until the summer of 2016. So I spent about 2 years kind of working on and off and on. And again, like I said, I wasn't really sure that I wanted to raise capital. I wasn't sure if I wanted to actually build anything to turn into a company. I actually had this kind of joke that I was like, oh, I'm just going to, build this tech and then just sell it for $10 million. I'd been down this path before, and I know how hard it is to build a company and how much, effort it takes to grow a team. And I was kind of burned out coming out of VMware. That's a whole different podcast, that experience. But so, I was sort of just futzing around and figuring out what I wanted to do. And then in early 2016, I was pretty excited about where I was going with the stuff. It seemed to look pretty good. And I changed my LinkedIn profile from relaxing to working on a secret startup, and had a couple VCs who I had contact before with reach out to me and say, hey, maybe we can get in on this deal. And one of them was Rob Hayes at First Round Capital. And so I met with Rob at a Pete's and showed him. I told him I don't have a pitch. It's going to be really low key and casual. And so we met at a coffee shop. I showed him what I had built, and he seemed really excited. And I was like, "Oh, geez, like I guess I'm fundraising. I guess I need to figure out what to do." And the funny story is that I reached out to a friend of mine who was at a company I won't mention, ostensibly to see if I could convince him to be my co-founder. And he introduced me to their CEO, and they were really excited about the product, and they actually offered me $10 million to bring it in. And
acquire
I turned them, to acqui-hire me and the product. And it was a hard decision, especially given that was actually my goal at the beginning. But at that point, I had reached out to a bunch of VCs and taken some meetings and actually had a couple term sheets and was excited about building it and decided, to go and build the company.
So I guess, you've kind of told the story, but I was going to ask, and maybe I'll ask it anyway, like what kind of tipped you mentally from, because you probably could have just built this, maintain control. Obviously making the decision to take VC sets you off on a different path of what you have to do with this company in terms of exit obligations and all that stuff, right? There's a whole new huge burden, right? So I guess what sort of tipped you into that, all right, let's go that route instead of,
sometimes it's a little bit just like a train, it just, you start down this process and you start meeting with these VCs and for me, this process went really smoothly. And they were very excited about it, and you can't help but get excited about it too and feel like you're onto something. And let's try it again. This is my third startup and my third time fundraising, and by far the easiest, not the greatest thing to brag about, but it came really quickly.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mentioned before we started talking, my last interview was with a woman who probably had the hardest fundraising journey. So this will be a good contrast. So let's talk about when you're raising money, kind of how much of it was obviously your they're betting on you, it's your third startup, or maybe how much of it was this product that looks cool, I don't know. Is there any way to kind of do a little pie chart on this?
I think it was both, to be honest. I think, I was able to build a lot of the product and get it to the point where it was very demonstrable and very usable. And, when I raised for SlideRocket, it was much more of a traditional meet with 40, 50 VCs, lots of rejections, people not getting it. In those days, people didn't understand what cloud was. Putting productivity on the web was something new. A lot of questions about how is this going to work offline, or what am I going to do if I'm on a plane? Are people going to let you put your data in the cloud? None of those things are questions anymore. Mm-hmm. SlideRocket was focused a little bit more as a sales and marketing tool. Marketing people would create presentations, sales guys would assemble them. This tool felt more accessible, I think, to VCs. They could see the value right there, and I think that made it appealing. And then there's always that product founder fit, which they like to espouse. And me doing presentations again really helped, with this idea that I was perfectly fitted for building something here, for competing with this in this space. Like I said, I only met with 5 or 6 VCs and got term sheets from 2.5 of them, plus first round. And so the whole process raising that A took me less than a month.
That's great.
And so in August of 2016. So it was a pretty good experience.
Yeah, they're supposed to all be on vacation in August, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the thing? No, that's cool. What was company number 1? Was it also in the presentation or?
No, the first company I did was a company called AdSpace Networks, which was actually digital signage. So the plasma or the LED screens that you see in malls and movie theaters and retailers that are running ads, that was a product that we built and sold. We started actually in the casino industry. When I first moved out to the Bay Area, I worked for a company called Silicon Gaming, which was a multimedia slot machine. It was the first touchscreen slot machine, and I was an art director creating games for it. And when I left, I started with this other guy, Lou, this company to do digital signage on top of slot machines as well. I really didn't want to be in the casino space. It's not something you want to spend a lot of time in, and I was actually about to walk away, and Lou came to me and he said, I was walking through a mall today, and I was like, we could put these in the mall and run ads on them. And I'm like, that's a pretty good idea. And so I never told him I was about to quit. And so we initially raised 15 million on that, and that was a crazy challenge. We were running around meeting with VCs, actually dragging a kiosk with a 42-inch LED or 42-inch plasma and a computer, and we'd like wheel it into VCs, and we did it in Manhattan as well. Like putting the thing in a taxi cab, and
I love it.
People weren't used to like us showing up with this giant box that we'd then have to set up, and that company was very capital intensive. We had to roll out our own signs and put satellite dishes on the roofs of malls. I mean, this was all in the late 90s. There wasn't Wi-Fi and cloud wasn't ubiquitous. So,
wow, that's cool. It's a good perspective. Very cool. So, okay, let's go back. So, raising money for Beautiful. I assume you went in pitching, or did you even have you didn't have a slide deck. I was going to say, did you use Beautiful to present your pitch deck, but you didn't?
You know what? I did it really casual. I made it clear to all these guys that I did not have a pitch deck, that I wasn't really sure what I was interested in, and just kind of went in and met and showed them the product and talked. And it worked really well. The irony, of course, was that I was building a presentation tool and did not have a presentation to show them.
Yeah.
And I think they appreciated that. I think that actually worked well. I think if you can pull it off, trying to keep, especially that initial meeting, more casual. I don't know if this is terrible advice or not, but it worked really well for me. Was just sort of stayed up front that this is more of a fact finding. Let's talk and let's see where things are going to go. And once I got the first term sheet, everyone got pressured to do to follow on or to match it. And so I ended up signing a term sheet with Shasta, with Doug Pepper from Shasta. I had known Doug when he was at Interwest. We had pitched to him with Slide Rocket, and so he was one of the guys I reached out to, and it worked great.
Did you have you're pitching, you're showing the product, you're talking about yourself, your background, all that good stuff. Did you have traction? Did you have customers using this, or?
Oh, no. I had not. No, still, it was just me, and I had no employees, nothing, just the product.
That's awesome. Yeah, this will be the episode where it's the aspirational episode that we'll label it. Good.
I mean, it helped. Obviously, I had sold Slide Rocket to VMware, and that made it, much easier to get in the door and to start the conversation from a positive, point of view. And again, the space has changed so much that it wasn't about convincing them about the technology and the cloud and all these things. It was more about talking about the opportunity for where this product and what was different about it.
Did you ever consider we had an event last night called Funding 2.0, and we went into token sales and crowdfunding and all this good stuff. Did you ever consider going around VC or going any other path, or was it, something you're familiar with that just felt the natural?
Not really. Again, it just sort of happened so quickly that and we raised 5.25, which was more than I wanted to or thought I would be raising in an A, or a seed. We ended up calling it an A because felt weird calling it a seed, although now
everyone's doing it
seems
now.
that $5 million is a seed. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I just no. I
No.
just
Yeah.
figured I'd take the money. It was there, and I'm not as scared of VCs as sometimes the conventional wisdom would have you be. My experience has always been pretty positive. I think the challenge with the VCs, all the horror stories that you hear, and all come about because the business isn't doing well for the most part, or something's not going well. And if something's not going well, then something's not going well.
Yeah.
And so, I'll be the first person to take responsibility for that. And if hopefully this will continue my positive experiences, but it seemed worth the opportunity, and just the ease, like not having to spend my time fundraising and have it happen so quick was really valuable to me. I mean, immediately just was able to just sort of focus on building the team and getting an office and making it real.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Let's go into a little bit of the weeds. You're kind of casually meeting with these guys, taking especially those first meetings very casually. You get a term sheet, and then how did you kind of take that? Like, literally, did you just call up the other 4 VCs and say, "Hey, I've got a term sheet. Do you want to put one down?" How did you kind of force their hand or leverage that?
So I got the first term sheet from the second person I met with. He immediately, in the initial meeting, messaged to me that he was really interested in moving forward. I think I'd already reached out to these other guys. Again, I only reached out to people I knew. So I'd met with all of them before. And when I reached out to Doug, I think I'd already met with him, and then I think by the time I met with him, I knew I was going to get a term sheet from the first VC, although I may not have had it in hand yet. And when I told him that, he just accelerated. I didn't really have to force his hand. He kind of wanted to play.
Yeah.
And then I had a third VC that was interested, but said they wouldn't be able to do it for the 5. They'd only be able to do it for 2. And so they kind of, I was interested in them, but and I liked the partner, but the other opportunities were better, and I really liked Doug. And then I went back to first round and said, I've got this term sheet. Do you guys want to get in? And they decided to join as well. So they put in $750, and Shasta did the four and
Okay,
half,
so
I guess.
Shasta led first round, kind of joined.
Yeah.
And then gotcha. And then Trinity. Oh, that was the first. Okay. And then Trinity came in the next round.
Trinity was the B. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Interesting. Well, let's see. I'm trying to think of questions that would be, I don't know how many tips you can give folks, other than the tip would be build 2 other successful companies.
Yeah. It gets even worse with the B. I mean, we raised the B before we even launched the product. And so that was just the meeting with Trinity. Around the end of the year, Trinity I had met Karan Merhandu during SlideRocket as well, but then he had funded Mile IQ, which was Chuck Dietrich's company. Chuck was the guy I brought in as the CEO of SlideRocket halfway through. And so he wanted to meet, and we met late in the year, late of 2017, a couple months before we launched, and he wanted to do the deal before we launched. And that was a big question, whether to raise funds presumably at a worse value. There was the fantasy, like we could launch the product and it goes gangbusters. We weren't planning to raise for another 6 or 9 months from until October or November of this year. And I wasn't sure whether I should launch the product and see what happened and leverage that momentum into better terms, or whether I should take the money that was in front of me. And at the end of the day, the way VCs work, they generally want their 20%, and that's kind of fixed. I mean, maybe you can get it down to 15%, but they want their 20%. And what you're really negotiating is the valuation and how much money you're getting for that 20%.
Yeah.
And I was getting $11 million for mine, and you know, that seemed like more money than I knew what to do with really at the time or was planning on, and in taking the risk of waiting and seeing what happened after launch didn't seem a prudent decision. So I decided to go ahead, and I really liked Karan, and he had very much the same sort of ideas and thoughts that Doug had, and that was important to me, to have two partners that weren't kind of at odds with each other, especially when it came to the time frame of monetization and what we should focus on. So that was super important. And so we actually closed that. We didn't announce that funding until a month or so ago, but we actually closed it before we even launched the product. In that case, I did pitch to the partner meeting, and what I did was I actually built my presentation using Beautiful.ai in the partner meeting. I started from blank and showed off the product, how easy it was, and was able to build the presentation in real time.
That's cool.
So that worked pretty well.
That's both kind of brave and ballsy and really cool, right? I like it. Yeah, that's cool. Really interesting. Good stuff. And so where are you thinking kind of going from here? Is this, you've already raised a big chunk of money. Is this kind of swing for the fences? Probably.
I don't know. It's kind of crazy. I mean, we're sitting on 13 plus million. We have 12 employees. So we've got a lot of runway and a lot of time to figure out how to get it right. And it's challenging hiring people here in San Francisco. So we're slowly growing the team, but I like to play it by ear. I mean, I want to focus on what's in front of me, which is this product that's getting amazing traction and adoption that's exceeding our expectation, and feedback that's exceeding our expectation, and make sure that we get it right. I think one of the challenges in SlideRocket was that our eyes were bigger than our stomach, and we tried to do too much, and we were selling to enterprise customers. We had a freemium product all over the place, and those things drag you back and forth and make it really hard to do one or the other particularly well. When I built SlideRocket, I started from the beginning with like a microcosm of a real company. I had a business development person, I had inside sales guys, I had customer support, QA, marketing, and engineering. This time around, we're really just engineering and marketing and some customer support. We're not focused on the sales and the business development part just yet. And that's a conscious decision to do one thing well. I think that the most important thing I've learned about meeting with VCs is that nothing screws up a VC meeting like having numbers. In some ways, having zero traction is better than having a little bit of traction, because as soon as you have any kind of numbers, whether it be revenue or users, they can extrapolate and sort of they can start that game of well, maybe you're not quite there yet. Why don't you see where you are, next month? But if you've got nothing, then it's all pie in the sky. It's all vision, and that certainly seems to help. I meet people who have, they're like, great, we got a big customer, we closed Twitter or we closed Facebook or something like that. But now VCs are telling us, but without a one-off, how are you going to do the next one? Which is kind of crazy on the face of it. You think you've made it because you've got this one customer and everyone's going to fund you, but these guys are good about figuring out what's a one-off and what's a sustainable business. So you're definitely better off getting them on the emotional side than on the analytical side.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Awesome. Well, this is great. Any other last kind of tips or lessons learned, things you're doing differently this time versus last time, either building the business or fundraising? You kind of touched on a few things already, but anything we haven't covered?
I'm just trying to keep things razor focused and what's in front of me. I think it's interesting that there's this conventional wisdom that you build a product that solves a problem for you, and that's what I've done in the past, and that's not what I'm doing this time.
Mm.
I realize that we as founders are probably not the norm, and we're problem solvers and we're technically savvy and in my case I have a design background and I need to solve problems for people who are not like me because there are more of them, and that switching around really helped create a product this time that seems much more accessible and much more valuable to the people who view it than another tool that.
Yeah, that's interesting. One last thing, actually, you mentioned
Am I
that
losing you?
you lost for a second, but I think I caught it. I think we're good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm not sure what's going on with the connection.
There's only been a couple
You've been fuzzy the whole time.
Yeah. I think it'll be okay, but we'll
Okay.
definitely check it out. Make sure. One last thing I wanted to kind of just touch on is, you mentioned you're really just engineering and marketing focused, and you kind of talked about how in the meetings you sort of, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, did you negotiate expectations around like revenue and when revenue will start, and kind of giving yourself more of a longer runway before you have to start showing numbers? I'm kind of reading between
No,
the lines.
honestly, it was the other way around. It was really, I thought going in and talking that I needed to have a compelling story about when we were going to start monetizing. And it was really the VCs who, and both Karan and Doug as well, started with Doug and then Karan sort of followed on, which was like, I think we should focus on traction and making sure the product works before we worry about revenue. The interesting thing was that from early on, from the first meetings with Doug, they were actually the ones who were pushing back against the need to monetize early. You go into these meetings and you definitely want to have a story about how you will monetize, and you think that's going to be important. But in this case, we all felt like the opportunity was so big that we wanted to really focus on making sure we got it right before we worried about that traction. And I think as well, Doug doing the first round had an eye on like, what do those metrics look like for the next round, and can we get enough momentum in revenue and users to tell a compelling story, or would we be better off focusing on one or the other? In our case, adoption. So we had a better story for the rounds. As it turned out, we didn't need to, because we preempted even launching the product to raise that.
Yeah.
B. And fortunately, Karan was of a similar mindset that, let's not focus on revenue right now. So I didn't really have to push it. They were right there with me of pushing it, and I was happy to. If honestly, if anything, internally, we're kind of like, shouldn't we monetize now? Shouldn't we monetize now? Because we have a lot of people coming and offering to pay for the product, and I've sort of gotten this mantra now of saying, no, we're just not what we're focused on. It's very liberating.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's awesome. Okay, last question. Any call to action plug you want to make? Hiring for something, or people listening to this are probably putting together a pitch deck. So should they come check out?
Yeah, they absolutely should, especially if you're doing a pitch deck. Beautiful.ai, check it out. It's free right now. It's going to be free for a while. Anything you create now will always be free, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
Cool. I can't wait to play with it myself. All right. Well, thank you, Mitch. This is awesome. I'll let you get back to it. Have a great weekend. Go Warriors. All that good stuff.
Yeah, take care, man.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.